Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and this is my card for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. So I started off with a piece of Ranger's watercolor paper, and I die cut it with the My Favorite Things Shaker Flower Die-namics that I've had sitting here and wanting to use for which seems like the longest time. So I die cut all the elements, and then I ended up running it through a couple more times with the scraps to die cut a few more leaves. And then I am using some Distress Oxide inks, and I'm going to sponge these onto all the different elements. So the color throwdown this week is basically like pink, yellow, and green. And I always link to it in my blog post, which is always the first link directly below the video. That'll take you to my blog. My blog post will have like all the info on the color challenge, etc., etc. So that was this theme, and I was like, oh, that'd be perfect for this shaker set because I've been wanting to use it. It's so cute. So I started off with Worn Lipstick Distress Oxide ink, sponging it all onto the like actual flower itself, and I'm using a sticky note once I have the ink on there to kind of protect the cardstock from my fingers, because just like regular distress inks, you can end up making marks like fingerprints and whatnot in the ink before it has a chance to dry. So that's where I like to use like a sticky note or just a scrap piece of paper to hold the cardstock so I'm not getting any marks on it. So I'm just going to go along, and I'm going to use the little stitched center for this one, and then I'm going to go and sponge all of the leaves. So I used fossilized amber for the center, and then I'm using cracked pistachio for the little stem piece and all these little leaves. And the one leaf you can pop out all those little die cuts, so it's just a fun little outline. But I kind of liked how it looked with all the little pieces on the inside of it. So rather than pop them out, I just left them into place. So, and then sponge the ink onto all of these. And then once I'm done all my sponging, I'm going to lay these all out on my scrap paper here. And this is the same scrap paper I used the last time I used distress inks when I made that little mermaid card, which I will have linked at the end of this video. So laid everything out, and then I spritzed a bunch of water into my hand, and then I'm like kind of picking it up with my fingers. I still have yet to master the Christina Werner technique of the way she will put water in her hand and then like drop it onto everything to create, like she creates like the perfect splatter. I don't know. I end up with huge blobs every time, and I did it again. Huge blobs. I can never get just nice, pretty, perfect little splatter. I don't know, but anyway. Dropped all the water onto it, let it sit for 30 seconds to a minute, and then picked it all up with my paper towel so it gets that very cool splatter effect. And then I pulled out one of the circle shaker pouches from MFT. Again, I've had these. I got the square ones rectangle. I've not used any of them. But I make shaker cards so quick and easy. So I grabbed the circle one, because this die set is sized to fit perfectly. You can use just a piece of acetate if you want, or transparency. Totally, just cut it down. That's great. But these pouches make it so much easier because then you don't have to use any foam tape. So I just did a really thin line of the Nouveau adhesive first around the back of that flower, and I adhered the first part of the pouch to that. And then I took a scrap piece of paper, and I'm just trimming a bigger circle around the flower center. Doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody's going to see it. But this way I can adhere that sponged center to this scrap piece of paper on my little like wonky circle I've created here. So same thing, I'm going to just squeeze on some of this Nouveau adhesive, adhere that to my scrap piece of white paper, and then I'm going to create my actual shaker element. So I'm using some different pretty pink posh sequins. I'm using some marshmallow ones in 2 different sizes, and then some yellow ones, and then the really, really tiny crystal clear 3mm ones. Just kind of sprinkling those rather liberally into my little shaker pocket here. So once I was happy with kind of the mix I created, I can then add adhesive just to this scrap piece of paper, just to that little perimeter there, and then flip this over, adhere it to the back of this flower, and then I kind of press everything down, and I've still got a few seconds because it's a liquid adhesive. Got a few seconds to shift everything around to make sure that flower center is centered within the pocket, and then it's good to go. And I've got this adorable little flower shaker. So I did that, and then I decided to create a little bit of a background here. So I have another piece of that same watercolor cardstock, and I'm just sponging on this fossilized amber again. I'm not worrying about the center area where I applied the ink first, where it's just darker and kind of a mess because no one's going to see it. I just wanted kind of a smoother effect towards the edges. And then same thing. grabbed some water, flicked that onto the paper, let it sit for a little bit, picked it up with my paper towel. Those big blobs, nobody's going to see them, so I didn't worry about it. And then decided I wanted to trim off one end of this because I wanted to just add a little bit of pattern paper. So I decided how much I wanted to trim that off with my paper trimmer. And then I grabbed the gray striped paper from the MFT Dots and Stripes Neutral 6x6. That is one of the few pattern paper packs that I actually use and not just hoard. So I chose the gray diagonal stripe paper and just trimmed down a piece just slightly bigger than what I cut off the other one. And then a thin amount of that same Nouveau adhesive. Again, you always want to make sure with liquid adhesives not to apply it too thickly because otherwise you're going to warp everything. So there's a little thin amount of that. And then I just trimmed off the piece that was hanging over the end of the card there. And then I'm going to apply, I'm going to adhere this in a minute, but I wanted to stamp a sentiment first. So I chose one from the More Essential Sentiment stamp set, and I'm going to line this up in my MISTI because I wanted to make sure I stamped this just right, and plus I'm stamping it. Even though it's the smooth side of watercolor paper, there's still the littlest bit of texture. So I grabbed my MISTI, lined up the sentiment and where I wanted to put it, closed the lid of my MISTI, and then I just grabbed my Simon Says Intense black ink for this and ended up having to stamp it 2 or 3 times to make sure it was stamped and like vibrant and black and perfect. So got that stamped, and then while I had my MISTI out, I pulled out the card base as well and did the same thing. I'm going to line up another sentiment from the same stamp set. So I get that lined up on the inside of my card and then close the lid, open it up, ink up the stamp, and same thing. Had to end up stamping it twice because this was a brand new stamp and I hadn't bothered to like condition it or, you know, rub my fingers against it or an eraser or anything like that. So that's where I love the MISTI. It enables my laziness, basically. So stamp the inside and then grab just a couple of the leaves that I had sponged, because that's what I planned on doing originally anyway, was grab those and just adhered those right below the sentiment just to give a little something and a little color on the inside of the card. So adhered those into place, and then I can go to adhering everything else to the front of the card. So I did think about popping this up with some foam tape, but I kind of like the fact that this can be a shaker card and be almost flat. You know, that pouch sticks out, you know, a little bit, but it's not super thick like normally it is, you know, when you're using a bunch of foam tape, etc., etc. So I adhered that background flat to the card, and then I'm going to adhere the flower shaker itself, and then I can tuck in the little stem here. And again, I'm just using this Nouveau adhesive for all of this, just applying like really thin little amounts to that. So I'm going to tuck in the stem, and then I can adhere all of the leaves that I wanted to use, and that finishes off this card. I thought about adding some twine and more sequins and yada yada yada, but one, as usual, I'm late. This card was supposed to be up last night, and 2, I just thought that this was just a cute card, you know, cute, really easy to make. The shaker just takes, you know, center stage. It's so fun. So I just thought it was best to leave it as is. So as always, I will have links below the video to my blog post. I'll have links to the color challenge. I'll have links to all of the supplies used in the description box directly below the video, so you can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!